How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 94. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another discussion, another journey where we check out a new movie either in theaters or streaming. We talk about it, we discuss, and we decide whether it is timeless. In this case, it's just me on this podcast, so it's really just me deciding with myself, do I consider a movie rewatchable? Can I see myself adding it to the collection and just continuing to love the different types of scenes and performances that I end up seeing? Before we talk about episode number 94, I do want to put up a link here for episode number 93 where I talk about Venom: The Last Dance. It was a very interesting and fun movie, but definitely go ahead and check out the review. That way you can get my full thoughts about that film, the end of the Venom trilogy. And let me know down below in those comments if you enjoyed Venom: The Last Dance and if you think it is timeless. For episode number 94, though, we're going to be talking about the new film from Edward Berger called Conclave. Now, a little bit of background before we go into the non spoiler thoughts of this movie. I had only seen one trailer for Conclave, and I had just seen that it had a lot of great actors. You had Ralph Fiennes, you had Stanley Tucci, you had John Lithgow, all these different actors that were playing cardinals for the Roman Catholic Church. And they just basically set up this very intense scene about what they were going to do to decide who the next pope was going to be. And it got me really hooked. I was like, wow, can't believe this kind of a story really is something that got me excited, something that I would want to check out. And I knew it was going to be all drama, but I was in on it, especially after that first trailer. So that's kind of a little bit of the background. Other than that, I didn't know much about the story other than we were basically going to see the process and the politics of choosing a new pope. So that got me in. So let's go ahead. I ended up checking this out on opening night. And for the non spoiler section of this, again, I'll just kind of cover a little bit of my overall thoughts after I left the theater. I'm not going to spoil too much about it, but I will give you some of the highlights and things that I really enjoyed. So after I checked it out, I got to say that Conclave was a very well done movie. I cannot believe that. And again, I know that the trailer really hooked me. It's just really about deciding the next pope, and you see the drama, the politics that are taking place. But I cannot believe that this movie was as interesting and as fantastic as it was. I can't believe it kept me hooked. And I'm not saying that I was going to get bored at any point, but I was just really curious. Could it keep my attention? You know me, guys. If you've listened long enough, I love action movies. That's typically the genre that I gravitate towards. And dramas, it's interesting, to some extent. Some of the performances are really what keep me in those types of drama-filled movies. But this one, not only did it have performances, but the story itself is just so intense and so interesting that I could not look away when I was watching this movie. Apart from the great story that we will dive into a little bit more in the spoiler section as we talk about pros and cons, the actual cinematography of the movie is just very well shot. Everything from just seeing them go through the entire conclave, you're seeing them go through room to room in the actual, which I'm assuming is the Vatican. It might not be, but you see them just in this environment and it all feels so realistic. And I just freaking love the way that they shot this film. You have excellent performances by some of the actors that I mentioned a couple minutes ago. All of them just went in on their specific character and it just felt like something that you could actually buy into. So really appreciated the performances on that side of it. And it also had a couple of thought-provoking moments, things that would make you kind of think, or made, at least me, it made me feel that, like, what would I do in this situation? What would I do if I had to really decide and make a really big decision on who the next pope is going to be? Just a lot of great stuff that was kind of filled into these 2 hours of the movie. Like I mentioned at the beginning, and really the background of why I wanted to watch it, this film revolves around the decision of making the next pope. And it basically starts off with the death of the current pope. He passes away through natural causes and of age, and then you immediately get dropped into the perspective of Dean Thomas Lawrence, who is played by Ralph Fiennes. He is basically now in charge of deciding who the next pope is going to be. So he has to basically wrangle up all the different types of cardinals throughout the entire world, bring them all together into this conclave, and then decide by majority vote who the next pope will be. But as you would expect in these types of films, you soon get to see and find out that not everything is as simple as you would expect. You have these different types of cardinals that start dealing in politics, folks trying to win votes of others. And the way that they have to vote is basically, you just have to go through a majority vote. You have, I think, around, I want to say over 100 members in the actual conclave voting on who they think should be the appropriate pope. But like I mentioned, you start seeing deals be made. You start seeing backgrounds of some of these cardinals that have done bad things. And you just start realizing that, man, these, even though we're dealing with such a holy people, and you dealing with priests and fathers and pastors, you notice that they're just like us, right? They're just humans. They have their own problems. They have their own tribulations. They even have their own faith tested in various different ways. And so it's just a lot of twists and turns that end up coming out until finally we hit the climax of deciding on one individual to become the pope in order to have a brighter future for many years to come. Again, a lot of things are occurring in these 2 hours, a lot of things that just kind of make you decide. And you as the audience member, you start thinking, okay, well, who do we really think is going to be the pope? Is it going to be somebody that everybody does not want to be at that seat? Is it going to be somebody not evil, but just not fit for this job? Or is it going to have to be somebody that does not want this position? And they have those types of thought provoking moments where it kind of lets the audience kind of think like, well, what would you do in this situation, right? At least that's kind of how I interpreted it. But overall, I really enjoyed this film. This film was great, and I'm so glad that I got to check it out in theaters. I would definitely recommend, if you have a local theater close to you, definitely check out this movie. Again, it is drama. It is just focused on a lot of conversations, discussions, a lot of dialogue is kind of going into play. But there's also moments where there's no dialogue and you just hear a beautiful score. You feel the intensity of what's being decided on, and how we should really as a group, not only just as as you see these cardinals deciding on a new pope, but really as humans, like how we should really just try to compromise in different situations. Really good stuff that was able to be represented in this film. So again, definitely would recommend you guys check this out. If you don't have a local theater that is playing this one, definitely check this out on streaming as well. All right, those are my non spoiler thoughts. Again, I really enjoyed this movie and would definitely recommend it. But let's go ahead and dive into some pros and cons. Let's start spoiling some stuff. That way, you guys can get a better sense as to why I enjoyed this film so much. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. My first pro for Conclave has got to be the tone that they set in this film. And what I love most is that they actually start off the film with this tone and it just stays consistently throughout the entire film. That tone that I felt was just cold. And it actually subverted my expectations of what I thought the feeling was going to be. I thought the tone was going to be a little bit more, friendlier, a little bit nicer. And again, that's just probably me being naive because we're dealing with something as holy as like the Roman Catholic Church and religion. So you always get this picture painted in your mind about, hey, like, well, this is how some of our pastors or our cardinals are. They're very nice and great to people. And again, you do see that. You see that aspect of it. But right from the beginning, like I mentioned earlier on in the non-spoiler thoughts, the current pope ends up passing away, and it just starts off with this very cold feeling because right when everybody's praying, at the pope's bed, they immediately then after they're done praying, they go to his finger and they just forcefully just take off the ring. And it feels like just seconds have passed by that the Pope has passed away. And you're already seeing them take away all the stuff, taking his ring, putting him in a body bag, and it just feels cold and it just feels very dark. And that again, that tone, you just feel that throughout, and it just intensifies as you go and you start seeing, well, who is the right pope for the situation? Who are the cardinals that maybe should not be considered at all? The entire voting system, all this different stuff starts playing out. But again, I think they really nailed this tone that just kind of right off the bat that like this is not going to be a happy story. Even though we are doing something that is going to bring a lot of joy to people in regards to having a new pope and just have the entire Roman Catholic Church behind this one person. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes before that actually happens, and I just feel like the entire tone of the movie was captured so well. And I also got to give a shout out to the performances of the actors, because the actors themselves also played into that type of a tone where just everything felt very serious, very dark. You have, like I mentioned before, you think of somebody that's in the church, you think of a father, a pastor, you think of a cardinal, you think of something very holy, very nice, very, uplifting. And then they show certain shots in this film where a lot of the cardinals are smoking. There's a cardinal that is, his name is Cardinal Tedesco. He is just very cocky, very arrogant, and he wants to be pope so bad, and he wants it to be his way, the almost like the classic Latin way, and just all this different stuff where you just get a bad vibe and a bad energy. But again, that just goes to the performances of the actors, that every single individual just adds their own kind of flavor, but it all fits in the tone. Like everything just completely makes sense. So, gotta shout out the director and the team for Conclave for just building a great tone within the film that just continued all the way through, even till the end. But really enjoyed that, and nothing felt out of place. Second pro for me is the way that the film sets up moments or scenarios that allow you as an audience member to kind of question, like, what would you do? Now, I got to be very clear. This might not hit the same way for everybody. So maybe you watch Conclave and you're like, well, Victor, I didn't really see or feel any moments where I had to make a decision myself. I'm just explaining my experience, but how I felt when I was watching Conclave is, man, I would not want to be in Dean Lawrence's position. I don't want to be the one deciding, like, well, hey, you find out news that this cardinal is doing, bribes, and he's trying to bribe other cardinals to vote for him. You have other folks that have had illegitimate sons, and you're just going situation through situation, and you're having to kind of decide, like, oh man, like this is such a tough decision that has to be done by all the Cardinals, but more specifically for Dean Lawrence, who is played by Ralph Fiennes. He has to kind of try to navigate the entire ship of the conclave, and you could see the weight on his shoulders as he goes by moment after moment and day after voting is concluded, and we don't get to a majority vote. He has to again figure out, like, well, where are these votes going to go? Who should we try to politic in order to point to a good cardinal that can be a pope. So a lot of different stuff that is kind of going on, and again, it makes you question what in regards to, well, what is the church's purpose, right? Should the pope be the figurehead to follow certain rules, or should it be played out more in regards to how we should unite everybody in the world rather than just choosing, hey, this is our religion and you have to follow it? The film also does a lot of questioning in regards to women. What should women's roles be in the church? What should they be? We always see them as nuns and they're always quiet and almost invisible, but should they play a bigger role in the church? So, a lot of very interesting things that are occurring in this film. And again, for me, at least personally, I put myself in Dean Lawrence's shoes and be like, oh man, like, well, I can't choose this cardinal because he's has a lot of very sketchy stuff that's going on in his background. But then we can't, get enough votes. Nobody cares about this cardinal. So what the heck are we gonna do? So a lot of different stuff that is going on, but all thought provoking things that I really enjoy, at least as an audience member when I'm watching a movie like this. All right, and then the last pro that I have is the score. I mentioned it a little bit before in my non-spoiler thoughts, but I thought the score within this film was so simple but effective. And I got to give a shout out to the composer for Conclave, Volker Bertelmann. Great job. There was, and I'm terrible with music and calling out what instruments are being played, but right from the beginning of the film, as you're following Dean Thomas Lawrence, walking to the location of where the Pope has passed away, you just hear this very dark and a very, again, this kind of a tone where you just feel like something is wrong. And it's played either by a violin or a cello, whatever it was. It just added so much tension to a lot of the scenes. And I've noticed that a lot of that specific violin or cello that was played, that, in a very somber kind of a tone, it was always when Ralph Fiennes was on screen. They just continued to try to add more and more complexity and more chaos to what is occurring in his situation, and it just made that performance feel even more amazing in regards to how Ralph Fiennes had to kind of deal with it in regards to like, okay, I have so many different cardinals coming up with so many different things, and I want to lead the church in the right direction, but what is the best decision to make? So really great stuff in regards to how they were able to play that. And again, what I love the most is that it was so simple. It was just one or two instruments, but it added so many layers to the movie. It added so much emotion to what was being played on the screen. So really well done. And I love how music can just simply just add a couple of more aspects to watching a movie, whether it be again challenges that Dean Lawrence is facing, or the tension that is rising because of certain popes wanting to be, or certain cardinals really wanting to become popes. So really well done to Volker for composing a beautiful score that adds so much to the film of Conclave. Now, going into the cons, I can easily say that I really didn't have any cons about this movie. Now, again, I want to be clear. Whenever I say I don't have any cons or nitpicks, that doesn't mean that I think the movie is perfect. That obviously there could be things after I have it marinate in my mind a little bit more. But right when I left the theater, there was really nothing that bothered me. The story again was very well done. I enjoyed the twists and turns within the film and what it was trying to kind of explain, the thought provoking moments that I felt like I was facing. Everything about it just was really well done. Now, again, there could have been maybe things where that could have explained, like, hey, well, this doesn't really make sense. But again, nothing that I can call out after I watched the movie. If I had to point to one con, it's not even with the movie. It was actually somebody in our movie theater was talking throughout the movie. So that was a huge con for the movie theater at AMC that I went to go watch. We went to an early one too. We went to go watch it at 11:30 in the morning. Why is there somebody talking and laughing in the theater? I have no clue, but that's probably the only con of my movie going experience of watching Conclave. All right, let's go ahead and continue on with the positivity for this movie. I want to call out my favorite performance, favorite moment, and favorite shot of Conclave. Let's start off with favorite performance. I mentioned before that there's a lot of great actors in this film, and everybody played their part so well. Like I mentioned, you had John Lithgow, Stanley Tucci, you had Ralph Fiennes, you had so many folks that were just, playing their part so well. Like I mentioned, Cardinal Tedesco, who was played by Sergio Castellitto, he did so well in playing this arrogant and cocky type of a cardinal. But if I had to choose one, I'm going to go with Ralph Fiennes, simply because of the fact that he had obviously most of the screen time, but it's also because of the fact that you could feel as an audience member the weight that was on his shoulder, the weight that he had to really endure in order to help navigate and figure out and really convince some of the conclave members who is the next individual that should be propped up as the new pope, who is the right figurehead in order to have the world really, behind this one individual and just really expand religion into various different parts of the world. So again, Ralph Fiennes just killed it in this performance. You could see it again just on his face. He didn't even have to explain or have crazy outbursts within the film. Although he did have a few of those moments, just him subtly looking past different individuals or looking away from the camera, and you could just see how much was going on in his mind. His eyes always could tell, like thinking through about, okay, what am I going to do for this situation? Should I myself as Cardinal Dean Lawrence, should I then consider myself as the next option for Pope? I don't want this Cardinal Tedesco to take over. So should I maybe, again, I've never had the ambition to do it. I've never had really the thought of like, maybe I should be the one that becomes the Pope. And you see him battling throughout the film of just trying to manage, trying to stay neutral, eventually has to kind of dip his toe into finding out more information about other cardinals. So really good stuff and a great performance overall. So my favorite performance in Conclave was Ralph Fiennes. Moving on to favorite moment, I got to say that again, kind of going back into Ralph Fiennes, but as Thomas Lawrence, he ended up giving a great speech at the beginning of the discussion of the conclave in order to decide who the next pope was going to be. Before you even go into voting, before you even go into any specific details about what was going to take part over the next couple of days, you have Dean Lawrence basically giving a speech to all of the cardinals that traveled from all over the world to this conclave. And he's reading off of a script. And then after he reads a couple words, he says, "You know what? I got to say this from the heart." And he basically goes on a full on, I want to say like a minute and a half, 2 minute monologue, could be longer. And it was just so well done because he really is just trying to speak from the heart and say, "Hey, I know that this is going to be tough. I know that this is going to be a tough couple of days where you're basically sequestered from the outside world and we're going to have to make a tough decision. But and he basically says in his speech, I hope that we move away from certainty." And he says, the biggest failure that we could have as a church is certainty, being certain as to who we know the next pope is going to be, because with certainty ends up coming up a lot of different types of traps that will lead the church into failure. And so he wants somebody that can challenge the church. He wants something that could basically put the church in a different perspective, not only for the cardinals themselves, but also for other people that are thinking about joining the religion as well. So really well done speech. I also got to throw it to another speech that was done in the third act of the movie. You have a cardinal called Cardinal Benitez, who is played by actor Carlos Diaz. He did such an awesome and amazing job because he had his own monologue and he went in discussing to all of his other fellow cardinals about how we should not be a religion of, dividing people. We should not be going to war with religion. That is not the point of religion. Religion should be something that has everybody on equal footing. We should not be challenging other ideologies. We should all be coming together and making each other better. So, really well done, and some great speeches that were pulled off within this movie as my favorite moments. And then finally, leading up to my favorite shot, I got to go with the auditorium shot where actually Cardinal Benitez is giving his speech. They frame it so well. You have like a very dark auditorium. You could still see all of the cardinals, and they're all sitting down, and a lot of them are turning back because Cardinal Benitez is right in the middle. And it kind of signifies, the two sides of the cardinals who were, trying to point to like, yes, we're with Cardinal Tedesco. We want something to kind of go in more of a radical form. Then you have people on the Cardinal Bellini side who wants things to be more modernized. And then you have Cardinal Benitez right in the middle, giving that very emphatic speech, explaining how we should not be choosing sides. We all have to be together. We all have to consolidate and compromise. And it's just that perfect shot where everybody's just turning, looking at Carlos Benitez right in the middle. He's the neutral side. He's the one that's trying to pull everybody to work together. Really well shot. And again, going back to the great cinematography that the team was able to pull off in this film of Conclave. All right, guys, those are my thoughts in regards to Conclave. Pros, one minor con that wasn't even about the movie. Again, I didn't want to spoil too much about the film because I really want you guys to experience it and see and really get to feel all the twists and turns that are going on within the film. Now we got to decide though, is Conclave timeless? Can I picture myself rewatching this movie over and over again and adding it to my collection? Although I have very high praise for this movie, I do got to say that at the moment, this film is not a timeless one for me. I enjoyed the performances. I think the performances is really what is just stands out so much, as well as the story and like the various twists and turns. But this kind of feels like almost in a way like once you know the different types of thought-provoking moments, once you know where the film is kind of going, it doesn't really add any more excitement to me rewatching it. What would get me back is definitely the performances. Now, I will say I am definitely going to rewatch this movie again. I want to kind of show this off to other family members, other friends, just to kind of check out the great performances of Ralph Fiennes as well as where the story is kind of leading you. I feel like if I were to rewatch it, it would be more so to kind of talk to a friend about it and say like, "Hey, what'd you think about this scene?" or "What'd you think about this?" I also feel like the reason why it might not be timeless for me at the moment is also just because of the type of energy that the film gives. Again, it's not a fast paced story, although there are a lot of things that are going on, and it's kind of taking you down a path of like, yeah, like here's this cardinal and what he's facing. Here's this cardinal what he's facing. It's not something that like is very high energy, and I noticed a lot of my timeless movies that I end up kind of adding to my collection, they're always kind of fast paced. There's either a lot of different types of action going on, or there's just a lot of different types of elements that kind of give me some type of an emotion. Although there was a lot of thought provoking questions, there wasn't a lot of emotion that was getting me out of it other than like, oh man, what would I do in this situation? So that could be another reason, me just kind of trying to break it down in my own mind as to why it wasn't timeless. But again, those are just all of my thoughts that I'm kind of giving you guys. More importantly, though, what do you think about Conclave? Have you had a chance to check it out in theaters? If you have, let me know down below. What did you think about the film? Do you think it is timeless? Would you rewatch it? And what was your favorite performance in the entire movie? All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining me and listening all the way through to this review of Conclave. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 94 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we talk about a new film and decide whether it is timeless. Just as a little teaser, it's going to be around Heretic. So super excited. Another horror movie for 2024. Definitely go ahead and check it out, guys. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you guys later.